register you so hard.
We are not presenting on the we are presenting on the symbolic technique, and Sony's attempt to lifestyle the Walkman. So Walkman, as we know, was a very successful product of Sony, and we'll be talking about that. We'll try to understand how the design department in Sony and in Japan per se works, and how it has borrowed from different cultures, and how it has how basically Walkman became as successful as it was. So we'll start with the importance of design in Sony. Sony has always prided itself in being a design-led corporation, and the products are designed to create and respond to consumer needs. So they are very consumer-centric. The organization of design in Sony works very different.
Just one second. Both of you. I think जो बात कर रहे हैं बाहर, नहीं यहाँ नहीं. Crampy, Ronald, please outside. I they have to present. आराम से. Whatever you've done, Ronald, you can give. You do all of it and see how. Please, sorry for the interruption.
So the organization of design at Sony works very different from a lot of other organizations which were existing at that time. The time was basically an era of manufacturing when there was a lot of emphasis on engineering per se, engineers and engineering. But Sony worked very different from them. There was a higher functional status of design in Sony versus engineering. They were given more. They were given a higher status. They had an access to the top management directly as compared to the engineers. They had a higher occupation status as well, and designers had, as I already said, had an easier access to the senior management, and Sony basically as a company ensured that they were always in touch with the contemporary trends of that time. So there was another model that they used to follow to do research regarding how their products should look like, and it was a showroom model. So they had showrooms in the top cities, the top global cities in Japan, including Tokyo. So I'll show you how it used to look.
That's pretty good. Installed. Okay. Put it in Chrome. Chrome.
Yeah, so this was the kind of showroom that they had. It had a very homely feeling, and the idea was that they wanted to replicate the environment of home, so that they can. So there were basically there were equipments inside the showroom to make sure that they were registering each and everything, that how a consumer who has come there in their showroom is using their product, how he is interacting with others while using their product, and the learnings of those things they used to try to incorporate in the upcoming designs. So that is how their labs were working at the time. Yeah. So in Sony, designers used to act as cultural intermediaries, and they used to promote consumption through attaching particular meanings and lifestyle to products. And we talk about how they try to basically lifestyleize the Walkman that they had. So another thing, the product design at Sony was about developing entire product concepts. So the idea was they used to start with the concept, and then they used to look at the feasibility. So the design department used to determine how the product is going to look like, and then the engineering department had to somehow work around those specifications and come up with the product, which was very different from how other companies were working at the time. So some basic data regarding Sony Walkman. The first model that came out was TPS L2, and the second was WN2. TPS L2 was not as famous. WN2 was more famous because of the sheer fact that it had, as in the Sony as a company had tried to incorporate some key characteristics of the Japanese culture in the WM2 model, which we talk about. So there were side switches in the WM2 model. Sorry, there were side switches in the older model, which was TPS L2, and it was not as happening or as famous as the WM2 model. And the WM2 model is the Sony model that we remember, is the Sony model that became so successful that it became a kind of fad in itself at that time. So the product was basically first envisaged by the design team first and then engineered by the engineering team around it, and this led to a better design. This led to a 30% reduction in the weight, and it became smaller, and this led to the Walkman being more portable than it was earlier. A quote by a former chairman and CEO of Sony says that at Sony we assume all products of our competitors will have basically the same technology, price, performance and features. Design is the only thing that differentiates one product from another in the marketplace.
Yes, so lifestyling to Walkman, what Sony tried to do was they tried to lifestyling to Walkman, what Sony tried to do was the initial target segment was young music listeners and people who are like music on the go lovers type of people. And once they launched the product in the market, they received very unprecedented reception. There was unprecedented reception for the product, and then they realized that now we have to change the design and we have to make the design so that it is widely accepted among all the bigger target segment. So what they did was they changed the look and feel of the product, and what they did is they targeted different segments, and for that they did flexible specialization, and in flexible specialization was they changed the particular designing components for targeting different people, and
so rather than the Walkman being one product, it became basically a number of different products. So Sony didn't actually make one design; they made around 700 designs, and each and every design was different in terms of the look and feel that it had, and they launched it in different geographies to suit those cultures' requirements, and that is how it became so successful. So here are two different Walkmans that were released during the 80s. As they released a solar Walkman as well as a waterproof Walkman. So the idea is that it was not just about the physical attributes, as in how it was looking. It was also about the usage, the functional attributes that the Walkman had at that time. So yeah, the symbols at Sony. So design at Sony was used as a tool to assign symbols to the product. So in Sony so I will give you a brief idea about how the Japanese products were considered at that time. At that time, so during 1950s and 60s, after the World War was over, at that time what happened was Japanese products were not considered of very high quality. So that was a problem that Sony had. So what they tried to do was so everybody understood that Japan had a very traditional, very amazing culture previously, historically. So they tried to borrow some specific characteristics from those cultures, and they tried to incorporate those specific characteristics in their products, like compactness, like simplicity, like fine detail in their product itself. And by doing that, they said that this product is very different from the products that are in the market, and so you should consume it. So these features were supposed to borrow from Japanese culture and traditional practices. The effort to build the Japanese brand should borrow from its culture to differentiate and identify their products. So they put an extra effort regarding this.
Adding on to his point, so what happened was after World War II, so the made in Japan tag became very weak. So there was a conscious, brand building effort by different companies at that time to give that made in Japan brand as a very reliable brand. What they did was that there was a conscious effort to make an identity of their own. So they wanted to create a different Japanese identity, that their product is different from all the other products in the market. So they tried to capture the cultural traits of of Japan, and they saw the culture like the compactness thing. It comes from the bonsai, having the bonsai thing and all, and then simplicity and then aestheticness from different Japanese traditions and festivals. So they try to capture that these different cultural traits, and they try to create a different brand image of themselves. So while going through this article, we found this cultural models thing there. So cultural model concept was given by M. Herskowitz. So what he said that when two cultures they come in contact with each other, then a culture which is dominant, it sort of transfers its values to a culture which is subsumed. So what happens that, taking an example, for what happens in Hinduism, when Islam became a dominant culture on Hinduism, so we sort of adopted the hijab system of Islam, and the parda system of Hinduism came in effect from there. And
another good example is the cricket example. Yeah. So it started during 1800s when the British colonized. Basically, when the British colonized India, at that time, cricket was considered to be a gentleman's game, and it was a game that was brought to India by the British. And later, as in the later years, we see that it was basically incorporated into the Indian culture, and today it is as in much more popular than the national game of India. So the idea of nationalism and democracy is another thing.
It also came from when British culture was sort of dominant on Indian culture at that time for like 200 years. So we adopted the idea of nationalism and democracy from British system, and then we were sort of forced into a democracy or nationalism sort of idea.
So in our article we saw a number of different paradoxes. So the first paradoxes that we could find was individualism versus collectivism. So we know that Japan is considered to be a collectivist society, but Walkman as a product is very individualistic in nature, because you are the one who is listening to the music, you are the one who is going to carry the product around. It is very individualistic in nature. So Walkman being a product that is derived from the Japanese culture seems to be a paradox, because Japan as a culture is collectivist and Walkman as a product is individualistic. The second paradox that we could find was basically the confusion of explaining whole using parts. So the idea is that if you say that this product has these three different features, and by virtue of having these three different features, this product can be considered to be a part of, this product can be considered to be derived from a specific culture is wrong. Though saying that a product is derived from a different culture and so it has these three different characteristics is what it should be like. Because a product can have a number of different features apart from these three different features that the Walkman product had. And these three different and those characteristics can be very different from the culture of Japan. Basically, what I'm trying to say is
simplified in a way. The thing is that what he's trying to say is basically culture and culture can be a whole kind of thing, and all these things all these cultural traits, they can be different parts of it. So culture in itself is a bigger social reality than all these small parts forming it. So when we say that, if I'm talking about some chalk here maybe, so then if I can say that this chalk is small and then it is white in color, and then I can say that okay, Americans are white, so probably this chalk represents the American culture. So it will be a wrong thing. Probably American products, they may have all these characteristics, but you cannot say that this chalk having 2 or 3 characteristics which American culture represents. So it is coming from America. So this article basically it again tries to say that there are different characteristics in the Walkman which inherently are Japanese in their nature. So this Walkman is Japanese in its origin. But we kind of do not agree with this point. We say that a product may have different characteristics and which may come from a particular culture, but to say that because of only these characteristics it is coming out of that culture, it will be a part versus whole conflict kind of system.
Another paradox that we found was regarding the R&D showroom that they have. So these R&D showrooms were basically in the top global cities of Japan, and the people that used to come to these showrooms were not exactly traditional Japanese people. They were people who were globalized. So saying that as in making a design observing their own characteristics as in the kind of behavior that they are displaying, and saying that since we have basically borrowed from this kind of a concept, we have borrowed from somebody who is Japanese and who is behaving in a specific way and design that product like that, and saying that that product is so derived from that specific culture would be wrong.
So we took some two examples to explain that. We took this example of beetle, that it is also compact, it is simple in design, aesthetic in nature. So you cannot say that it is Japanese because it is German. So I cannot say same goes for Apple. It is simple in aesthetic and neat design and everything, but then again it is not Japanese. So these two things they again go against this article. So going on. So we have brought a managerial panel to again Modi's election campaign with the group before us was good. So we can see there were some symbols used. Like there was this white lotus thing. So it had like many meanings. One of the meaning was this like BJP's campaign is not rightist this time, or they are coming from their saffron colored lotus to white lotus, and they will have a more secular orientation this time as a party. And then again, it has a different psychological effect as well, because on EVMs you see that all the symbols they are of white and black in color. So once people see white lotus everywhere, so when they go to vote, they will click on that white lotus button there. And then again, their campaign started with this Ganga Aarti event in Varanasi. So in this way again, this campaign itself had a paradox in itself, that they wanted to be a secular party in one front, and then they start with an event which is very Hindu in its it is very Hindu, and then again instead of having a private affair, they telecasted it on media. So they started with a Ganga Aarti, and then they were trying to be a secular party as well at that time. Then there were like in the Faridabad rally, they had a Shri Ram picture, and then Ayodhya temple's picture at the backdrop where that Mr. Narendra Modi is giving a speech. And then the BJP's manifesto, it again came up with those all rightist ideas of common civil code, Article 370 and whatnot. So, then before we talk about this, we will talk about our framework, which we have given it the name the framework because we deliberated very much upon it, and then we realized that framework name should not mean, it should be. And then we came up with these 4 things to establish a connect between a product and a culture. So first of all, first 2 steps are similar, which we do for symbolic technique, which is understanding symbols and then finding relation of product traits and depicting cultural traits. Like to find whatever the article is doing is the first 2 things. What we thought was to dwell more into it, then only you can give a connection between a culture and a product. So the third step is understanding the current trends. So going back to the Walkman, so the current trend in the society in Japan at that time was the demographic dividend of Japan was at its peak, like 25 to 30 or somewhere around that. So the youth, there was youthness in the culture. So Walkman, to say that Walkman came there and it had compactness and all, and not saying that there was a need of a such product which kind of suits the demands of the people at that time. And then again, there is a time context in that. So you can explain the time context.
Yeah. So the idea is so the idea is that every culture is different at every point of time. As in, a culture cannot be static. If you are saying that this culture has these specific characteristics, so you have to also specify that this culture had these characteristics at that specific point of time. Without the notion of time, the idea of a culture having a specific characteristic is just abstract, because as I said, the culture keeps on evolving throughout time. So take the Japanese culture for that matter. The traditional Japanese culture and the new Japanese culture that came out after World War II were very different from each other. They had some basic things in common, but the new Japanese culture had a lot of ideas derived from the effect that USA for that matter had on Japan at that time. The consumerism that developed in Japan at that time was also very dependent on how US consumerism was at that time. And so
understanding the current trends and the time context along with the deep-rooted cultural traits is one of the steps which we thought is more important. And then again, after that, we have to understand the agenda behind any marketing effort which has been done. Like what was the agenda behind coming up with the Walkman at that point of time, or what is the agenda behind Modi's marketing campaign. So now, applying this on this Narendra Modi's campaign, so we realized that at that time when Narendra Modi came in the picture, when his campaign came in the picture, there was a solid need of change in the society, and that need of change was built with different cases at that time, while like Vikas case and different scams at that time which were coming up. Then Jal Lokpal bill issue came up. So all those, they developed that need for change, and then Narendra Modi's marketing campaign, it comes up and it says that Abki baar Modi Sarkar, choose us, we will bring the change what you need and all that. So they sort of leverage that need in the society of that need for the change. And then there was a conscious brand building effort through identification of need. Like first of all, they understood, BJP understood that there are some major issues in the society like inflation or corruption, and then all those issues, violence issues of women, and then so they came up with slogans like Mehengai Garibi, Bhrashtachar or Nari par Atyachar, Janta Maaf Nahi Karegi, and all those slogans. So they sort of, one slogan is covering all these important issues of the society at the right time. So it sort of takes care of the current trend in the society. So not only it is delving into the deep-rooted cultural traits, but also it takes care of the current trends like the need for change, and then all the issues which were coming up in the society from all different places. So now the idea of change, so that I have built on this thing, and Abki baar Modi Sarkar, the Abki baar part has been the thing which they wanted to focus that. So this same campaign was done when Atal Bihari Vajpayee came in 1996, something like Abki Bari, Atal Bihari, something like that, some slogan was this. So they again came, so at that time also there was a strong need of a different party and some change in the society. So they came with that slogan, and again they are using that slogan and the similar words to leverage that experience again. And so initial marketing was used, what initially they did was they sort of they challenged the base of all the different leaders in this like in the fray that time. So he said he mocked Manmohan Singh by saying that he's a silent leader and he does not say anything and all that.
Yeah, so at that time there were a lot of cartoons regarding Manmohan Singh being the silent PM, and this is basically one of those cartoons wherein Narendra Modi asks basically.
Time for another reflectors completed, yes. And then firstly initially they marketed by demarketing all the people. So they demarketed Arvind Kejriwal by saying that there was a famous comment that he coughs a lot, and then there were many slogans which he passed initially to de-establish all the leaders who would be like probable candidates, and then they leveraged the Gujarat's growth model and success model, and in a sense he said that he will take India to that level, and then you elect him the Prime Minister, and then he will use he will then take India to that development level. So he sort of, they not only this campaign, it took care of all the cultural issues or all these symbolisms which they kind of portrayed, but also it saw the like all the current situations in the society at that time, and there was definitely an agenda. That agenda was this party. They, after a really long time, they had this strong, what should I say, there was a good opportunity that all the other opposition parties are really weak, and this is the only time when they can really come up in the power. So this is how we have applied our framework. And want to add something? No.
Thank you.